I was almost going to tell a story, but then decided not, about the time after I had heard a kind of I don't know, I suppose if a religious motivational speaker talk about the need to go and apologize to your parents for all the ways within which you were a dickhead when you were younger. I decided to do that when I was about 19, and I sat my dad down, and I said, Dad, I really want to just go through some times and walk us through. That's what I've been told to say. Walk us through some times when I may not have been the ideal son. And Dad shouted out to my mother, Mammy, Padraig's about to apologize. And then she shouted in, for what? And Dad looked at me expectantly, and I was like, well, all the time I wasn't an ideal son. And Dad goes, when were you ever an ideal son? And then I gave up the experiment. That was the end of my experiment in kind of family dynamics a la American Christians. So then I just went back to being an ordinary Cork son rather than somebody who spoke with emotional fluency about everything that was going on. So
I think I'm on your father's side on this one, Padraig.
Well, actually, no, I totally am also on my father's side on this one. Yeah. Anyway, it is very nice to see you. The theme for tonight is experiment. And if anybody here is here for the first time, 10 by 9 is an event where 9 people have up to 10 minutes each to tell a true story from their life. And there's a theme every time. And the theme tonight is experiment. And nobody preaches, nobody tries to get you to join anything. They just tell a true story from their life. And we are thrilled tonight to be in partnership with the Northern Ireland Science Festival. They've been going for about 4 or 5 years now. Some of the people who are involved with the Black Box are also involved with the Northern Ireland Science Festival. And so we're delighted to be part of their cohort of events for this time. I'll drop the link into the chat in a while just so that you can have a look at whatever else is going on for the NI Science Festival. It's always good stuff. And yeah.
It's now exactly a year since we were last in the Black Box. Isn't that kind of incredible for those of you who are Black Box regulars? But since then, we have, and I've counted them, we have done, this is our 18th 10 by 9 since that night. So we're kind of pleased with that. We went to Zoom in late April. Wasn't sure that it was going to work, to be honest, but we saw the 10 by 9 Adelaide, they did it, and we joined them, and it was fantastic. So we thought, yeah, we can't let this go. And we've had 53 podcasts since then, so that's actually more than one a week. So, hey, top man, thank you very much.
Well done, Paul.
Also, Padraig, do you want to tell us about your exciting week on Instagram? This is for the younger members of the audience. Who did you get following you this week?
Well, I got a message on Sunday from somebody in direct messages on Instagram going, dude, Camilla follows you and you don't follow her. Rude. And I initially thought that somebody was implying that Camilla Parker Bowles was on Instagram. And I just deleted the message thinking Camilla Parker Bowles wouldn't be on Instagram. And if she was, she wouldn't be following me. Anyway, it turns out that there is a Cuban-American pop star called Camilla. I did not know this because she is not played on Radio na Gaeltachta. And so I looked her up, and indeed she did. She was following me on Instagram. She only has 52 million followers.
53.
My apologies. Apparently she listens to a podcast that I release about poetry, and she was finding some of the insights about poetry to be beneficial. So suddenly some friends of mine who have a 10-year-old who I've never met was telling all their friends, our friend Padraig is friends with Camilla. And so suddenly I'm friends with the 10-year-old. I have suddenly been appropriated into their worldview. Our friend Padraig. Yeah, whatever.
And also you picked up another follower with quite a few who's connected to Camilla.
Oh, yes. Also somebody who I didn't know about, a fella called Sean Mendes. So, yes, apparently he likes the podcast too. But I have never heard him either because he also is not played on Radio na Gaeltachta, and his name doesn't pop up in the 3,000-year-old Babylonian exorcism rituals that I read most mornings. And speaking of great joy, we're going to have the great joy of hearing Paul Doran with the first story of the night.
It was Amsterdam, so it was okay. It's not against the law there. They see no problem experimenting with tetrahydrocannabinol. Now, I'd been to the city several times and I love the place. The Rijksmuseum, all the Rembrandts, Anne Frank, the Van Gogh Museum, the Brown Bars. The first time Padraig and I went was early in our time together. We visited every church you can imagine, took in a few museums, walked once through the red light district and hated it. We set off for the Anne Frank house one morning, but we hadn't done our research. Turns out it was Yom Kippur, so it was closed. But Padraig had an alternative, the Bible Museum. It was pouring with rain, so it made sense to be indoors, even if the Bible Museum wasn't high on my list of must sees. The Bible Museum was in one of those great canal houses, though, which I was curious to see. The museum highlights were an exhibit of biblical smells in little clay jars and a diorama of the Temple of Jerusalem with even a little toy goat. The scapegoat, as my partner explained to me. So there we were in one of the sex and drug capitals of Europe, where anything went if you wanted it to, and we were smelling cedarwood and frankincense in the Bible Museum. Neither of us was up for trying anything stronger than beer on that trip. There was no way either of us wanted to do the drug experiment. I must be going through a prudish phase, thanks to my good living new partner. In fact, the biggest drama of the trip was when Padraig almost got knocked down by a man on a motorbike who was not best pleased. So much for the easygoing Amsterdamer cliche, we hastened away to a bar for a nerve calming drink. But this wasn't my first time in Amsterdam. I'd been once before with a previous partner. It too was a fairly civilized trip. Canal cruise, Van Gogh and Rijksmuseum, saw Helen Mirren and her husband enjoying the art there. And she's tiny, by the way. A day later, I saw Leslie Manville in a cafe buying a pastry. So everybody was in Amsterdam. But on this trip, my partner and I were up for a bit of experimentation. Now, we were from a generation that fell between the hippie cannabis culture and the rave drug culture. We liked pubs and beer, not lounging around being really trippy. Plus, it was very much illegal at home and tainted by paramilitaries and crime. But this was Amsterdam and it was legal, and there were charming little coffee shops, and you didn't have to smoke anything because I hate smoking. You could eat it in a brownie, a tray bake with a kick. So when we went, both ridiculously nervous, like children raiding Granny's handbag for cash, the guy behind the counter could tell. He asked if it was the first time, and we both said yes. He recommended we share a brownie so as not to be overwhelmed. So we shared a brownie and some coffee and sat waiting for something to happen. Nothing. We gave it about 20 minutes and thought we had maybe been given a dud, or else this stuff wasn't what it was cracked up to be. Anyway, we left to go for a walk. We hadn't been walking very long when suddenly the pavement started to move in waves. The paving slabs were moving and rolling underneath my feet. The street was coming up to greet me, and I needed to sit down. It was all very pleasant, and we were both lucid enough to know that we needed to go to our hotel room to get away from public places. Luckily, we hadn't far to go. Back in our room, we lay down and let the room revolve and undulate around us. Like the pavement, the ceiling too was moving, a bit like water. And then, and then another effect started to build that no one had warned me about. Devastating and uncontrollable horniness. Oh my God, I had never experienced anything like it. Excuse me. It was overwhelming. Now it all made sense. The coffee shops and the red light district. One was driving the custom to the other, supply and demand. Thankfully, we both felt the same, so that was okay. Problem solved. And we basically snoozed all afternoon. Frankly, we got a bit bored with the experiment and were wondering when it would wear off, so we'd go to the pub for a drink, which it did, and we did. I returned to Amsterdam November 2019 for a long weekend. Padraig had been working there, so I came to join him. We were staying on a houseboat and it was fantastic, warm and cozy, and only very occasionally could you tell it was on water, so gentle was the swell, and that was only when another boat went past. I was determined to have another go with the local tray bakes, but first we had to do all the serious stuff. This time we did get to see the Anne Frank house, went back to the Rijksmuseum, did lots of walking, and thankfully there was no Bible museum this time. We had exhausted that pleasure. By Saturday, I was getting impatient. I wanted to repeat my experiment. I wanted to know if I could replicate the results from the previous time, pure science, obviously. I encouraged Padraig to join me. I even referred to all the writers who had carried out similar experiments to see how it impacted on their craft. All those romantic poets, Aldous Huxley, Philip K. Dick, but he was having none of it. Nor did he particularly want to be in the company of a very high and very horned up partner. I'll go to the pub and do some work, and you can meet me later when you've calmed down, he said. Okay. So off I went to the coffee shop. Not a particularly nice cafe, soulless, bit more like a McDonald's for recreational cannabis use. I looked at the menu, but to be honest, I hadn't a clue. The guy behind the counter asked what I would like, and I told him I didn't smoke, so he offered me a choice of two muffins, no brownies, sadly. How much is in them? I asked, having done my research. Three in this, five in this. Always erring on the side of caution, I went low, bought a latte and the three muffin for 13 euros. I ate and drank and went back to the boat, waiting for the cabin to start undulating pleasantly and that ravenous hunger inside to rear its head. I thought, I may as well start editing the 10 by 9 podcast while I'm waiting. And then, once I wasn't thinking so clearly, I would stop. It was a complicated enough edit, slightly different to usual. It was me telling a story, intercut with me answering questions and stories, or answering questions about storytelling. I started to feel a little tiredness behind the eyes, but not enough to need to lie down or to stop editing. I felt the boat rise and fall slightly at one point and was thinking, is this it? Is this the start of it? No. I heard another boat's engine and knew it was just our boat in its wake. And that was it. I finished the podcast edit thinking, surely it's going to kick in now. I published the podcast. Surely it's about to hit like a tsunami, but nothing. Instead of being caught up in an eroticized high, I was grounded, 100% sober. I texted Padraig, the experiment has failed. Where are you? I need a pint.
Oh, Paul, you were so disappointed.
What a waste of money.
I know, 13 full euros, money that you had
13?
earned by yourself.
I know. It was disappointing, yeah.
Yes, desperately disappointing. Our neighbours in the nearby houseboats would have been awakened to all kinds of noises.
Well, who knows? I have to say, if anybody's curious, by the way, because maybe I should listen back to it. Maybe it is the worst edited podcast ever. It is podcast 123. And also, just bear in mind, I was on my holidays and I was still putting out that podcast for you all. So
I know. My God,
devotion
everybody's in your debt.
such devotion.
That's devotion to storytelling.